The sun hadn't really risen over Detroit in 3 months, not properly anyway. It just kinda crept up behind the smoke and ash like it was scared of what it might see. Marcus Webb crouched behind a burnout Chevy, his breath coming out in short bursts that fogged up the frigid morning air. His hands were steady though, gripping the crowbar that had become more familiar to him than his own reflection these days. 27 years old, and he'd gone from flipping burgers at Danny's Diner to bashing in skulls just to see another sunrise. Life was funny that way, except nobody was laughing anymore. "Yo, Marcus, we got a problem," whispered Jamie Rodriguez from somewhere behind a pile of rubble that used to be a convenience store. The kid was 19, all lanky limbs and nervous energy, but he had eyes like a hawk and could spot trouble before it spotted them. That skill had kept their little group breathing for the past 2 weeks, ever since they'd lost Detroit's so-called safe zone to a horde that came through like a tsunami of rotting flesh and gnashing teeth. "I'm counting maybe 15, 20 of those things shuffling around the pharmacy entrance. That's way more than we planned for, man." Marcus swore under his breath and adjusted the backpack straps cutting into his shoulders. They needed those supplies, needed them bad. Becky Thompson was running a fever back at their hideout, and little Amy Chen, wait no, Marcus caught himself, little Amy Martinez was coughing up stuff that didn't look right. Without antibiotics, they'd both be dead in days, maybe hours. And if there was one thing Marcus had learned in this screwed-up new world, it was that every life mattered. Every single one. They'd already lost too many good people to give up on anyone now. 15 to 20, huh? Marcus peeked around the Chevy's rusted frame, squinting through the perpetual gloom. Sure enough, the dead were congregating around Miller's pharmacy like it was Black Friday and brains were on sale. They swayed and stumbled, their movements jerky and wrong, like puppets with half their strings cut. Some were fresh enough that you could still see who they used to be, still wearing their Target uniforms or business suits or gym clothes. Others were just walking nightmares, so far gone that they barely looked human anymore. "All right, we can work with this. Where's Danny at?" "Right here, boss," came a gruff voice from Marcus's left. Danny Fletcher emerged from behind an overturned bus, all 6'3" of him moving surprisingly quiet for a former construction worker built like a brick house. His fire axe rested easy on his shoulder, the blade stained dark with things Marcus tried not to think about. Danny was 45, had 3 kids somewhere that he refused to believe were gone, and fought like every zombie he put down might be the one keeping him from getting back to them. "I'm seeing what Jamie's seeing. This ain't gonna be no cakewalk." Marcus nodded, his mind racing through possibilities. A frontal assault was suicide. Even with 3 of them, 20 zombies were too many. These things didn't feel pain, didn't get tired, didn't stop until you destroyed their brain or separated their head from their body. He'd seen a zombie with no legs drag itself half a mile to get to fresh meat. They were relentless, and that made them terrifying in a way that no slasher movie had ever captured. "We need a distraction," Marcus said finally. "Something to pull most of them away from the entrance. Danny, you still got those firecrackers we found at that sporting goods store?" A grin split Danny's weathered face. "You know I do. Been saving them for a special occasion. Well, Christmas came early. Here's what we're gonna do." Marcus laid out the plan quick and dirty. Danny would circle around to the east, set off the firecrackers in that old parking garage about 2 blocks down. The noise would draw the majority of the horde away from the pharmacy. Once they cleared out, Marcus and Jamie would make a quick run inside, grab whatever medical supplies they could carry, and get out before the dead realized they'd been played. Simple, straightforward, and only about 1,000,000 things could go wrong. "What if they don't all go for the noise?" Jamie asked, voicing the concern they were all thinking. "What if some of them stay behind?" "Then we handle it," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "We've handled worse, right?" That was debatable, but nobody argued. They'd all seen worse, sure, but they'd also lost people every single time. Marcus could still see Tommy's face, the way his eyes went wide when that zombie grabbed him from behind during their escape from the safe zone. Could still hear Sarah's, wait, no Sarah, he meant Rebecca's screams when she'd been pulled into a ventilation shaft by hands that came out of the darkness. The dead were everywhere, and the living were running out of places to hide. Danny clapped Marcus on the shoulder, the gesture grounding him back in the present. We got this, kid. 30 minutes, in and out, then we get those meds back to Becky and little Amy. They're counting on us. Everybody's counting on us, Jamie muttered, but he checked his weapon anyway, a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire that looked like something out of a video game. The kid had put that together himself, said if he was gonna go down, he was gonna go down swinging for the fences. Marcus respected that. They synchronized their watches, an old-school move that felt weirdly appropriate in a world where cell towers were just expensive tombstones and the internet was a fairy tale you told to remember the before times. Danny moved out first, disappearing into the urban wasteland like a ghost. Marcus and Jamie waited, counting down the seconds, watching the zombies mill around with that horrible patience that the dead seemed to have infinite supply of. The thing people didn't understand about zombies, Marcus reflected, was that they weren't mindless. Not completely. They had enough brain function to hunt, to track, to remember that they were hungry even if they couldn't remember their own names. He'd seen them open doors, climb stairs, even use crude tools to get at prey. Whatever virus or curse or cosmic joke had created them, it had left just enough of the person behind to make it tragic while taking away everything that made them human. You ever wonder what it's like? Jamie whispered. Being one of them? Every damn day, Marcus admitted. And that's why we make sure we never find out firsthand. You still got your exit strategy? Jamie's hand went to the knife on his belt, the one they all carried as a last resort. Yeah. You? Yeah. They didn't say more. Didn't need to. In their world, some fates were worse than death, and turning into one of those shambling corpses was at the top of that very short list. Marcus had promised himself that if he got bit, if he got infected, he'd take himself out before the change could complete. He'd made everyone in their group promise the same thing. It was mercy, in the end. The only mercy they had left to give. The explosion of firecrackers going off sounded like gunfire in the hollow city, sharp cracks that echoed off empty buildings and broken windows. The effect on the zombies was immediate and almost comical. Their heads snapped toward the sound in unison, like a pack of dogs hearing a dinner bell. Then they were moving, that awkward shuffling gait turning into something faster, more purposeful. Not quite running, the fresh ones could run, but a kind of aggressive stumbling that covered ground faster than you'd think. It's working, Jamie breathed, excitement creeping into his voice. Holy crap, it's actually working. Marcus counted the zombies as they peeled away from the pharmacy entrance. 15, 16, 17. 3 stayed behind, too focused on whatever they sensed inside the building to be distracted by distant noise. 3 was manageable. 3 was doable. Wait for it, Marcus cautioned, watching the main horde disappear around the corner, following the promise of the firecrackers like kids after an ice cream truck. Wait until they're completely clear. We don't want any stragglers spotting us and calling the whole crew back. They can do that? Jamie looked nervous now. Call each other? Not with words, but yeah. They make this sound, this clicking moan thing. Brings every dead thing in earshot running. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way, had barely escaped with his life when one zombie's death rattle had summoned what seemed like half of Detroit's former population. So we keep this quiet. Quick kills, headshots, no noise. Another minute ticked by, then 2. The street seemed clear except for the 3 zombies still pawing at the pharmacy's front door, their fingers scraping uselessly against the glass. Marcus gave Jamie a nod, and they moved out together, keeping low and quiet, using the scattered debris and abandoned cars as cover. Up close, the smell hit Marcus like a physical force. Death had a scent, thick and sweet and wrong, and it clung to the zombies like cheap cologne. The three by the door were in various stages of decay. The freshest one, a woman who might have been somebody's mom or sister or wife, still had most of her skin and hair. She wore a nurse's scrubs, which was grimly ironic. The other two were further gone, skin sloughing off to reveal muscle and bone, their clothes hanging off them like rags. Marcus signaled Jamie to take the one on the left while he handled the nurse and the third one. They'd done this dance before, knew the steps by heart. The key was speed and accuracy. Hesitate and you were dead. Miss your shot and you were worse than dead. He closed the distance in 3 quick strides, crowbar already swinging. The first impact caught the nurse zombie in the temple with a sickening crunch that Marcus felt all the way up his arms. She dropped like a puppet with cut strings, whatever virus animating her body finally severed. The third zombie turned toward him, jaw dropping open in what might have been a moan or might have been hunger. Marcus didn't give it time to decide, bringing the crowbar down in an overhead strike that caved in the top of its skull. Beside him, Jamie was handling his target with the barbed wire bat, the weapon making wet, tearing sounds as it did its work. The zombie went down hard, twitched once, and went still. 3 for 3. Clean and quiet. Nice work, kid, Marcus said, already moving toward the pharmacy entrance. The door was locked, but the glass was cracked, spiderweb from where the zombies had been beating on it. A couple good hits with the crowbar and it shattered, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet street. Marcus froze, listening for that telltale moan that meant they'd been heard. Nothing. They were good. Inside, the pharmacy was a mess. Shelves were overturned, products scattered everywhere, and there was blood on the floor in dark, dried pools that told their own horror story. But the pharmacy counter in the back looked intact, and that was what mattered. Marcus vaulted over the counter while Jamie stood watch by the door, his bat at the ready. The drug storage area was a gold mine. Whoever had owned Miller's Pharmacy had stocked up good before the end came. Marcus started grabbing bottles, reading labels as fast as he could. Amoxicillin, azithromycin, ciprofloxacin. He wasn't a doctor, hell, he'd barely graduated high school, but he'd learned more about antibiotics in the past 3 months than he'd ever wanted to know. He grabbed pain meds too, bandages, antiseptic, anything that might keep his people alive another day. Marcus, we got movement outside, Jamie called, his voice tight with tension. The horde's coming back early. How early we talking? Marcus didn't stop grabbing supplies, stuffing them into his backpack until the seams strained. Real early. Like, maybe 2 minutes out early. Marcus swore and grabbed 3 more bottles before forcing himself to stop. Greed killed in this world. Getting caught because you wanted just one more score was how you ended up as zombie chow. All right, we're done. Back door? They found it behind the pharmacy counter, an employee entrance that led to a back alley. It was locked from the inside, which was good news, meant nothing had gotten in this way. Marcus threw the bolt and pushed it open, wincing as the hinges squeaked. The alley beyond was narrow and dim, filled with dumpsters and the smell of rot, but it was empty of undead. Go, 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 Marcus urged, and they ran. Behind them, they could hear the horde returning, that collective moan rising like a sick chorus. The zombies had figured out they'd been tricked and they weren't happy about it. If zombies could feel anything like emotion, Marcus figured anger was probably still in the mix. They were predators, and predators didn't like being outsmarted. The alley opened onto a side street, and Marcus nearly ran straight into another zombie, this one a kid no older than 12 in a Little League uniform. He jerked to a stop, crowbar rising instinctively, but couldn't make himself swing. Even now, even after everything, some part of him couldn't smash in a child's skull, even a dead child. Jamie didn't have that problem. The bat came around in a tight arc, and the kid zombie dropped. Don't freeze up on me now, man, Jamie said, breathing hard. Dead's dead, don't matter how old they were. I know, Marcus said, but his hands were shaking. I know, you're right. Let's just get back to the others. They navigated the ruined city by memory and instinct, avoiding the main roads where hordes liked to gather, sticking to alleys and side streets, and once, crawling through a collapsed building that made Marcus's claustrophobia scream. Every shadow could be hiding death. Every sound could be the moan that ended them. But they kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and Marcus had too many people counting on him to die today. Their hideout was in the basement of an old office building, accessible only through a service tunnel that you had to know was there to find. Danny had discovered it during his construction days, remembered it when they needed a place to hide. It was cramped and cold and smelled like mold, but it was safe, and safe was the most valuable commodity left in the world. The entrance was hidden behind a false wall in an underground parking garage. Marcus gave the signal knock, 3 quick raps followed by 2 slow ones, and heard the sound of furniture being moved. A moment later, the wall swung inward, and they were looking at the tired but relieved face of Patricia Miller, a former school teacher who'd appointed herself the group's den mother. Thank God, Patricia breathed, ushering them inside. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing layers of sweaters against the cold. We heard explosions. Thought maybe you'd run into trouble. Nothing we couldn't handle, Marcus said, swinging the backpack off his shoulders. We got the meds. How are Becky and Amy doing? Patricia's expression darkened. Not good. Becky's fever spiked about an hour ago, and Amy's cough is getting worse. I've been keeping them comfortable, but... She trailed off, but Marcus heard what she didn't say. Without medication, they'd both be dead soon. Well, they got medication now, Marcus said firmly. Where are they? The hideout was divided into sections by hanging blankets and scavenged room dividers, creating the illusion of privacy in the single large basement space. About 20 people called this place home now, all that was left from the safe zone's collapse. 20 people out of the 300 that had been there. The math was depressing, so Marcus tried not to think about it. Becky Thompson was in the medical section, a corner they'd set up with cots and what supplies they'd had. She was 23, had been studying to be a veterinarian before the world ended. Now she was just another sick person fighting for her life. She looked terrible, skin pale and slicked with sweat, breathing shallow and rapid. Amy Martinez was on the cot next to her, 7 years old with pigtails and a stuffed rabbit she'd refused to leave behind when they evacuated. She was trying to be brave, Marcus could tell, but her eyes were scared and she couldn't stop coughing. Hey there, kiddo, Marcus said, kneeling beside Amy's cot. Heard you weren't feeling so hot. Good news is, I brought you some medicine that's gonna fix you right up. Really? Amy's voice was hoarse from coughing. Promise? Marcus felt the weight of that question like a physical thing. Promises were dangerous in this world. Breaking them was easy. But he looked at her hopeful face and couldn't bring himself to hedge. Promise. You're gonna be okay. Patricia took the antibiotics with practiced efficiency, reading labels and calculating dosages with the confidence of someone who'd taught biology for 30 years. She got both patients medicated and settled, then pulled Marcus aside. That was a good thing you did today, she said quietly. But we need to talk about our long-term situation. We're running out of supplies, Marcus. Food, water, medicine, all of it. This hideout was only supposed to be temporary, remember? We can't stay here forever. I know. Marcus rubbed his face, feeling the stubble that had turned into a full beard without him noticing. I've been thinking about that. There are rumors, right? About safe zones that are actually holding? Fort Knox, that island in Lake Superior, that compound in Colorado? Rumors, Patricia repeated skeptically. Marcus, we can't base our survival on rumors. We need facts, we need plans. You think I don't know that? The words came out harsher than he intended, and Marcus took a breath, forcing himself to calm down. Patricia didn't deserve his frustration. Nobody here did. Sorry. I'm doing the best I can, Patty. We all are. She softened, patting his arm in that maternal way she had. I know you are. You've kept us alive this long, and that's no small thing. I just want to make sure we're thinking beyond tomorrow, that's all. Before Marcus could respond, Danny came through the hidden entrance, his expression grim. We got a problem. A big one. Of course they did. Because one crisis at a time was apparently too much to ask for. What kind of problem? The horde we dodged at the pharmacy? They followed us. I was up doing a perimeter check, and they're gathering outside. Not right on top of us, but close enough. And they're not leaving. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. If the zombies knew they were here, if they'd somehow tracked them back to the hideout, then this place was compromised. And if this place was compromised, they had nowhere else to go. How many? Marcus asked, already moving toward the entrance. At least 50, maybe more. And they're making that calling sound. More are coming. Marcus climbed up to street level with Danny, using a hidden observation point they'd established behind a boarded-up window. What he saw made his blood run cold. The parking garage and the street beyond were filling up with zombies, dozens of them, shuffling around in that aimless pattern that meant they sensed prey nearby but didn't know exactly where. Yet. They're gonna find us, Jamie said from behind Marcus, having followed them up. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually they're gonna find the entrance. And when they do. He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. They all knew what happened when zombies found a populated hideout. It was the safe zone all over again, people screaming and running and dying while the dead poured in like a flood. We need to leave, Marcus said. The words felt like admitting defeat, but he forced them out anyway. Tonight, under cover of darkness. We take what we can carry and we move. Move where? Danny demanded. Marcus, we got sick people down there. Old people. Kids. We can't just wander around the city hoping to stumble onto somewhere safe. We head north, Marcus said, the plan forming even as he spoke. Toward Lake Superior. That island, Royale Island or whatever it's called. If even half the rumors are true, they've got a sustainable community up there. Walls, farms, safety. We can make it. That's gotta be 400 miles from here, Danny protested. Through zombie-infested territory, with winter coming on, with limited supplies and people who can barely walk. Marcus, that's suicide. Staying here is suicide, Marcus shot back. Slow suicide, maybe, but just as dead in the end. At least heading north, we got a shot. A real shot at something better than just surviving another day in this tomb. Danny and Jamie exchanged glances, having one of those wordless conversations that people who'd fought together could manage. Finally, Danny sighed. All right. I think you're crazy, but I'm in. When do we leave? Midnight. That gives us about 6 hours to prep, rest, and get everyone ready to move. Jamie, I need you to inventory our supplies, figure out what we can carry and what we have to leave. Danny, weapons check. Make sure everyone who can fight has something to fight with. I'll talk to Patricia, get the civilians organized. They split up, each to their tasks, and Marcus headed back down to the hideout. He found Patricia already gathering people, her teacher's instinct apparently sensing that something big was happening. The group looked at Marcus with a mixture of hope and fear, and he hated that he couldn't promise them everything would be okay. All right, everyone, listen up, Marcus said, pitching his voice to carry but not echo. Our position here is compromised. There's a horde gathering outside, and it's only a matter of time before they find us. So we're moving out, tonight, heading north toward the rumored safe zone on Lake Superior. The murmur that ran through the group was anxious but not panicked. These were survivors, people who'd already lived through the worst days of their lives. They knew how to handle bad news. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's gonna be dangerous. It's gonna be hard. But staying here is a death sentence, and I didn't keep you all alive this long to watch you die in a basement. So here's what's gonna happen. Each of you gets one bag, pack light but pack smart. Warm clothes, sturdy shoes, any medication you need. We move in a tight group, no stragglers, no heroes. We watch each other's backs and we don't leave anyone behind. What about Becky and Amy? Someone asked. They're too sick to travel. We carry them, Marcus said simply. We make stretchers, we take turns, whatever it takes. I meant what I said. Nobody gets left behind. He saw some of the tension leave the group's shoulders, saw them stand a little straighter. People needed leadership in times of crisis, needed someone to tell them there was a plan and a purpose. Marcus didn't feel like a leader, felt like a guy who was making it up as he went along and hoping he didn't get everyone killed. But if they needed him to be strong, he'd be strong. The next 6 hours were a controlled chaos of preparation. Supplies were sorted and distributed, weapons were sharpened and cleaned, and someone even managed to cook a hot meal using the last of their canned goods in a camping stove. It might be their last hot meal for a while, so people savored it, even though it was just beans and some questionable meat from a can. Marcus found himself sitting with a group of the younger survivors, kids mostly, ranging from Amy's age up to teenagers. They looked at him like he had all the answers, and he wished he did. Is it really safe, this island place? Asked Tyler Jackson, a 14-year-old who'd lost his entire family in the initial outbreak. The kid was all sharp angles and nervous energy, but he was smart and asked good questions. Honestly? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I know it can't be worse than here. And sometimes, Tyler, hope is more important than certainty. Hope keeps you moving, keeps you fighting, keeps you alive. My dad used to say hope was for suckers, Tyler muttered. Said the only thing you could count on was yourself. Your dad wasn't wrong, but he wasn't completely right either. Yeah, you gotta be able to count on yourself. But you also gotta be able to count on each other. That's what's gonna get us through this, all of us working together. One of the other kids, a girl named Jessica Ramirez who couldn't have been more than 10, looked up at Marcus with solemn eyes. Are the monsters gonna get us? Marcus wanted to tell her no, wanted to promise her safety and protection and all the things adults were supposed to give kids. But he'd learned that lies, even comforting ones, had a way of making things worse. I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure they don't. And you know what? You're gonna help me. You're gonna stay quiet when I say be quiet, and move fast when I say move, and be brave even when you're scared. Can you do that for me? Jessica nodded seriously. I can be brave. I know you can, kid. I know you can. Midnight came faster than Marcus wanted. The group assembled by the hidden entrance, 20 souls packed tight with their worldly possessions on their backs. Becky and Amy were on makeshift stretchers, groggy from medication but stable for now. Danny and 3 other strong guys would rotate carrying duty. Marcus took point, crowbar in hand and a headlamp strapped to his forehead. The light was a risk, made them visible, but it was a bigger risk stumbling around in the dark and walking into a horde. Jamie brought up the rear with 2 other fighters, making sure nobody fell behind. Remember the rules, Marcus said quietly. Stay tight, stay quiet, and if something goes wrong, you run. Don't fight if you don't have to, don't be a hero. The goal is survival, not glory. Everybody clear? A murmur of assent, and then they were moving, slipping out of their hideout and into the nightmare city beyond. The parking garage was dark and silent, the kind of silence that made your skin crawl because you knew it could be shattered at any second. Marcus led them along the route he'd scouted, avoiding the main concentration of zombies, sticking to the shadows and the covered areas. They made it 2 blocks before they ran into trouble. A lone zombie, a businessman still in a tattered suit, stumbled out of a storefront and locked eyes with Marcus. For a frozen second, they stared at each other, the living and the dead, and then the zombie's jaw dropped open and that horrible moaning click started up. Marcus was on it in 3 strides, crowbar silencing the thing before it could complete its call. But the damage was done. In the distance, answering moans rose up, and Marcus heard the shuffle of many feet heading their way. Double time, people, move. Marcus hissed, and the group broke into a fast walk that was almost a jog. Becky's stretcher bearers were struggling, and Marcus dropped back to help, getting his shoulder under one end of the stretcher and taking some of the weight. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit were growing louder. The zombies had their scent now, literally and figuratively, and they were coming. Marcus's mind raced, trying to remember the city layout, trying to think of somewhere they could hole up or lose their pursuers. There, the old subway entrance about 3 blocks east. If they could make it there, get underground, they might be able to lose the horde in the tunnels. Left at the next intersection, Marcus called. "We're heading for the subway." They made the turn, and Marcus's heart sank. The street ahead was packed with abandoned cars, a massive pileup that blocked the way forward. They'd have to climb over or go around, and either option would slow them down too much. Through the building, Danny suggested, pointing to an office complex with its front doors hanging open. "Cut through, come out the other side." It was risky, buildings could be death traps, but they were out of good options. Marcus nodded and led the charge inside. The lobby was a disaster area, furniture overturned and papers scattered everywhere, but it was empty of zombies. They moved through as fast as they dared, the stretcher bearers navigating around obstacles while the fighters kept watch. They found the rear exit and spilled out into an alley, and Marcus allowed himself a moment of hope. They'd put some distance between themselves and the horde, bought themselves some time. The subway entrance was just ahead, a dark hole in the ground that promised safety or at least a different kind of danger. Almost there, Marcus encouraged. "Come on, people, we got this." They descended into the subway, and the temperature dropped noticeably. It was like stepping into a crypt, and Marcus supposed that's what it was, in a way. The dead city's underground veins, cold and dark and empty. He flicked on his headlamp, and the beam cut through the darkness, illuminating graffiti-covered walls and trash. Strewn platforms. "Which way?" Patricia asked, breathing hard from the exertion. Marcus oriented himself, trying to remember the subway maps he'd studied back when he used to commute to work. That felt like a lifetime ago. "North Line, Platform 3. Should take us under the worst of the city, bring us up in the suburbs. From there, we follow the old highway north." They moved into the tunnels, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides. The headlamp created weird shadows that moved and jumped, making Marcus see threats that weren't there. Or maybe they were there, and he just couldn't see them yet. Every drip of water, every rustle of movement could be a zombie lurking in the dark. The group was flagging now, exhaustion and fear taking their toll. Marcus could hear people breathing hard, could feel the weight of Becky's stretcher digging into his shoulder. But they kept moving, because stopping meant dying, and he'd be damned if he let these people down. They'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when Jamie's voice came from the rear of the group, tight with fear. "Marcus, we got followers. Something's in the tunnel behind us." Marcus halted the group and strained his ears, listening past the sound of their own breathing and heartbeats. There, faint but unmistakable, the shuffle and moan of zombies in the dark. They'd been followed into the tunnels. "How many can you see?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. "Can't see nothing, man, but it sounds like a lot. We need to move, like, right now." They moved, faster now, sacrificing stealth for speed. The sounds behind them were getting closer, and Marcus realized with a sick certainty that they couldn't outrun this. Not with stretchers and tired people and kids who were already pushed to their limits. They needed a defensible position, somewhere they could make a stand. Up ahead, the tunnel opened into a station platform, one of the bigger hubs with multiple levels and exits. Marcus made a command decision. "Everyone up onto the platform, now. We're gonna hold here, thin out their numbers before we keep moving." The group scrambled up onto the platform, and the fighters formed a line while the non-combatants huddled behind them. Marcus counted their forces, himself, Danny, Jamie, and 5 others who could handle a weapon. 8 people to hold off God knew how many zombies in the dark. Lights off except for one, Marcus ordered. We don't want to make ourselves easy targets. Let them come to us, and we take them down as they climb onto the platform. Headshots only, make every hit count. They waited in the tense darkness, the single headlamp creating a cone of light that felt pitifully small against the vast dark. The sounds of the approaching horde grew louder, echoing off the tunnel walls until it seemed like they were surrounded. Then the first zombie stumbled into the light, a woman in a business suit with half her face missing. Danny's axe took her down, and then they were coming in a wave, more than Marcus had feared, dozens of them pouring out of the tunnel like roaches. The fighters swung and stabbed and crushed, putting down the dead as fast as they climbed up, but there were so many. Marcus lost himself in the rhythm of it, swing and strike and swing again, his crowbar rising and falling in a brutal arc beside him. Jamie was holding his own, the barbed wire bat tearing through rotted flesh and brittle bone. Danny fought like a machine, tireless and efficient, every swing of his axe dropping another zombie. But they were getting overwhelmed. For every zombie they dropped, 2 more seemed to take its place. Marcus felt fingers grab at his jacket and barely twisted away in time, bringing the crowbar around to smash the grasping zombie's skull. This was bad, this was really bad, they couldn't hold much longer. We need to fall back, he shouted over the chaos. Fighting retreat, toward the north exit. They moved backward in a coordinated shuffle, the fighters maintaining their line while the civilians retreated. It was working, barely, but they were losing ground fast. Marcus saw one of the fighters, a guy named Robert Robert Martinez, get pulled down by 3 zombies at once. His screams cut off abruptly, and Marcus forced himself not to look, not to think about it, just keep moving. They made it to the escalators, fighting their way up the frozen steps while zombies clawed at their heels. Patricia had gotten the civilians up and moving toward the exit, and Marcus could see the faint glow of moonlight ahead. They were almost out, almost safe. The escalator gave them a momentary advantage, the zombies struggling with the steps, and the fighters used those precious seconds to put distance between themselves and the horde. They burst out of the subway station and into the night air, and Marcus had never been so happy to see the ruined city. Keep moving, he gasped, his lungs burning. Don't stop, don't look back, just move. They ran through the suburban streets, past strip malls and housing developments that had once been the American dream and were now just graveyards with walls. Marcus lost track of time and distance, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other and making sure his people stayed together. Finally, when he felt like his lungs might burst and his legs might give out, Marcus called for a halt. They'd reached the edge of the suburbs, where the city gave way to the highway and the woods beyond. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had faded. They'd lost the horde, at least for now. Marcus did a quick head count and felt his heart sink. They'd started with 20. They were down to 16. 4 people lost in the tunnels, including Robert. 4 more names to add to the list of those he'd failed to protect. But 16 people were alive who might not have been. 16 people who still had a chance, still had hope. Marcus would mourn the dead later. Right now, the living needed him. Everyone okay? He asked, scanning the group for injuries. There were scrapes and bruises, one woman had a nasty cut on her arm that Patricia was already treating, but no bites. No infections. They'd gotten lucky. We can't keep running like this, Patricia said quietly, pulling Marcus aside. People are exhausted, Marcus. We need rest, real rest, not just a 5-minute break before the next crisis. I know, Marcus said, and he did. But he also knew that rest was a luxury they couldn't afford, not yet. Just a little further. We get onto the highway, find a car or truck that still runs, and we can cover some serious distance before sunrise. Once we're well clear of Detroit, we'll find a place to hole up and recover. I promise. The highway was a graveyard of vehicles, hundreds of cars and trucks abandoned during the initial panic of the outbreak. Most had been picked clean by other survivors, but Marcus was betting they could find something still functional if they looked hard enough. He had Danny and Jamie start checking vehicles while the rest of the group rested. It took an hour, but they finally found what they needed, A old moving truck that still had gas in the tank and a battery that held a charge. The engine turned over on the third try, coughing to life with a rumble that sounded like music to Marcus's ears. "Everybody in the back," Marcus ordered. "It'll be cramped and uncomfortable, but we can all fit. Danny, you drive. Jamie, you ride shotgun and keep watch. I'll stay in the back with everyone else." They loaded up, humans packing in like refugees, which Marcus supposed they were. The truck lurched into motion, navigating around the abandoned vehicles, and slowly picked up speed. Marcus watched Detroit disappear through the truck's rear windows, the city that had been his home reduced to a dark smudge on the horizon. He should have felt sad, he thought. Should have felt some kind of loss for everything that city had represented. But all he felt was relief, and maybe a little bit of hope. They were leaving the dead behind and moving towards something better. It had to be better. The alternative was too depressing to consider. The truck rolled north through the night, eating up miles of empty highway. Marcus sat with his back against the wall, crowbar across his lap, and let the exhaustion finally catch up with him. Around him, people were doing the same, settling into whatever rest they could find. Tyler, the 14-year-old kid, slumped down next to Marcus. "Hey, Marcus. Thanks for not leaving us back there. In the tunnels. You could have run, saved yourself, but you didn't." "Course I didn't," Marcus said, too tired to be humble. "We're in this together, kid. All of us. That's what makes us different from them, from the dead. We still care, still look out for each other. Lose that, and we might as well be zombies ourselves. You really think this island place is real? That will make it there?" Marcus looked at the kid, at his hopeful eyes and the trust written plain on his face, and he chose his words carefully. "I think that as long as we stick together and don't give up, we got a shot. And sometimes, that's all you can ask for. A shot." Tyler nodded and closed his eyes, and Marcus let him rest. The truck rumbled on through the darkness, carrying its precious cargo of survivors toward an uncertain future. Behind them, Detroit burned, or maybe it had already burned and this was just the smoldering aftermath. Either way, it was behind them now. Marcus watched Becky sleeping fitfully on her stretcher, watched Amy curled up with her stuffed rabbit, watched Patricia keeping vigil over her flock even in her exhaustion. These were his people now, his responsibility, and he'd be damned if he let them down. The first rays of dawn started to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Marcus that the world was still turning, still beautiful despite the horror that had claimed it. It was a new day, another chance to survive, another step towards something better. "Hey, Marcus," Danny called from the cab. "There's a rest stop ahead. Looks pretty intact. Want to hole up there for the day, let people actually rest?" Marcus considered it. Rest stops were risky, popular spots for both survivors and zombies, but his people needed the break, needed time to recover before pushing on. "Yeah, let's do it. But we scout it first, make sure it's clear. I'm not taking any chances." The truck pulled into the rest stop, a typical highway oasis with bathrooms, vending machines, and a small food court that had probably served terrible coffee and worse burgers back in the day. Danny killed the engine, and the sudden silence was jarring after hours of road noise. Marcus and Jamie cleared the building first, moving room by room, but it was empty. Someone had been here before, scavenged most of the supplies, but they'd left behind some bottled water and a few snacks that hadn't spoiled. It wasn't much, but it was something. "All clear," Marcus announced, and watched relief wash over his people's faces as they filed inside. They'd made it through another night. That counted for something. Patricia organized people, getting them settled and comfortable with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 30 years managing classrooms full of unruly students. Marcus found himself a corner and sat down, letting his guard down for the first time in what felt like forever. They'd lost Detroit, lost people, lost almost everything. But they still had each other, still had hope, still had a destination. Marcus pulled out a battered road map he'd salvaged, tracing the route north with his finger. 400 miles, give or take. 400 miles through zombie-infested territory with limited supplies and people who were barely holding it together. It should have seemed impossible. Maybe it was impossible. But Marcus had learned that impossible just meant nobody had done it yet, and he'd always been stubborn. They'd make it to that island, to that rumored safe zone, and they'd do it together. "Hey boss," Jamie said, settling down next to Marcus. "We really gonna make it? For real?" Marcus looked at his people, at the exhausted but living faces surrounding him, at the kids still clinging to stuffed animals and hope, at the fighters who'd stood beside him against the darkness. "Yeah, kid," he said, and found that he actually believed it. "Yeah, we are. We've come too far and fought too hard to fail now. We're gonna make it, all of us together. And when we get to that island, when we're finally safe, we're gonna remember everyone we lost getting there. We're gonna honor them by living, by building something better." "That's pretty deep, Marcus," Jamie said with a tired grin. "Yeah, well, the apocalypse makes philosophers of us all," Marcus replied. "Now get some rest. We move again at dusk, and I need everyone sharp." As the day wore on and his people rested, Marcus kept watch, staring out at the highway and the world beyond. Somewhere out there was safety, community, a future worth fighting for. And he was gonna get his people there, no matter what dead things stood in his way. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were gonna be okay. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And in a world full of darkness, sometimes a start was all you needed to find the light.